The Fantasy Ruckers are back, and it's a new year, which means a brand new Fantasy Major League Rugby season. We get you all ready and prepared for MLR 2023. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 48 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this continued journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. And it might be a new year, but it's the same old host. I'm Ryan Yee, and with me, as always, Matt Yee. And unfortunately, the big man himself, Devin Vanderpool, couldn't attend to this first New Year's episode, but his little one, Louie, is a little bit under the weather. So obviously, he had to take care of that family first. But hey, brand new year, Matt, and the 2023 season is just around the corner. How excited are you?
Oh, I'm getting fired up the closer we get. And look, hey, for the new year, I wore something pretty, wore something nice, brought my formal wear to the show. You know, I got to look good for the first episode of the new year. I've got a little clash though. It's a Wallabies Howery, I believe it's called, and a Hurricane shirt. So that's a bit disgraceful, but you know, it is what it is. I got to dress up nice. And yeah, it's unfortunate the big man can't be here. I've been missing his bald head. I haven't seen him in a while, but you know, he'll be back. He's got to take care of his daddy duties.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit more important responsibilities than us fooling around here and talking a little bit fantasy rugby. But nonetheless, still very important stuff. And I know a lot of our viewers and listeners want to hear all the latest that's happening in the world of fantasy MLR. We got to wish our viewers and listeners a happy new year as well. I know we took a little bit of a holiday break there. We enjoyed our time back in New York with the family, got to spend Christmas over there, celebrate that, and then obviously enjoy New Year's as well. So for all of you listeners and viewers, we appreciate all of your continued support throughout 2022 and helping make this fantasy rugby project get as far as it has so far. And hopefully we can continue this thing in 2023 and make it even better than it was last year.
Hey, look, I had to take some time to recuperate with the family, you know, spend the holiday, spend the new year to recuperate. But now I'm back. Now I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm counting down the days to the draft, the fantasy rucker draft. And, you
Yep.
know, I'm going to start putting in work. The people are going to start putting in work by continuing to give us that support that they always give. So, you know, we're all back. 2023, new year, first place, new me. Let's go.
There we go. And I was just going to say, Matt, that I hope that in your New Year's resolution, that one of the things that is in there is making a little bit of an improvement in your fantasy rugby performance
Hey,
heading into
that
this
could
season.
mean seventh. So,
That
you know,
could.
you
That
never
could mean
know.
something. It's all about just getting better year in, year out. Hey, if it takes 8 years for you to finally win this jersey back here, that's what it's got to take. But at least you're improving year in and year out. So it is good to hear that. And yeah, we're excited to start the 2023 year. Lots to talk about in this opening episode
Oh
of the
yeah.
new year. Lots to catch up on. Obviously, a whole bunch of roster moves to talk about.
Oh yeah.
It seemed we took our break, but it seemed that
The
the
teams did
MLR
not
league.
take a break, right?
Yeah,
The teams did not
exactly.
take a break. They just kept going. I mean, I think there was one day without some news, and then the rest was just it just kept coming and coming. And now that we're in 2023, it's like they were saving all this up just to release everything for 2023 and make the first 9 days of the year the most eventful days of social media for MLR. So it's getting me excited, right?
Exactly. It does feel like the front offices definitely did not take a break. But hey, that's just how important this 2023 year is, getting all set up for going for that MLR Shield in 2023. So yeah, like I said, lots to break down on that front. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of news outside of the roster moves as well that we're going to touch on. And we do also have a bunch of league updates that we want to talk about to some of our,
Oh yeah.
especially some of our newer league members that are getting their first taste of fantasy rugby in
Good luck.
2023. We had them on in the last episode episode of 2022 Rugby Wrap Up is joining the league, and we obviously have James Dealey of MLR Stats also joining the Fantasy Ruckers League. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to provide an update for them, update for maybe some of the league members that have taken a break from fantasy rugby and need a little bit of a refresher on how this whole thing works. Matt, I know you've been hard at saying there has been no, there might have been a holiday break for you, but you are definitely all in tune with all the rules and stuff and all the strategies, all those stickies that John had told you about in our
Oh,
league
if there's
in his tip
anything
last
I
year.
know, Kamish, I know the rules. I know the rules. You can I'll be following those rules. Maybe that's why I ended up in last place. But hey, again, new year, new me.
Exactly. All right. Well, before we get into all that great stuff, if you aren't already, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers on Instagram, Fantasy Ruckers on Twitter. We also got, obviously, if you're watching, you know of this, but the YouTube channel as well, where you can see Matt's beautiful face, Devin's beautiful face, and all of our guests that come on the show. Make sure you hit the like button there, subscribe to. It really does help us out in helping grow this thing and making fantasy rugby become a thing. And if that's not enough for you, you can also join our Discord community as well. That's been growing slowly but surely, and
Hey, that
a great
Discord's about to
place
get live, people. Just
and a
wait.
great place for people to talk all things MLR, fantasy MLR, and things. It's been a fantastic space. You'll be able to find that link down below. So
Mhm.
with that out of the way, I guess we got to get started, Matt. There's a whole bunch, like we said, to catch up on. So let's
We
get
gotta get into it, or else we're never gonna get into it. So let's get going.
Exactly. All right, let's get into it. We're going to start off with some of the roster moves that have happened over the course of the last month and have some sort of fantasy MLR implication. Obviously, there was a whole bunch of moves that were made, a whole bunch of players that are finding new spots, both coming to the MLR, leaving the MLR. A handful of those actually have a fantasy impact. So we're going to really highlight those portions of those roster moves. So let's get right into it. Like we said, we'll start off with Rugby New York. Not many, I guess, let's say, trades or roster exchanges, but a whole bunch of re-signings of bringing back some pretty critical guys that were a big part in their championship season last year. We'll start off the top here, but there's a couple names on the list that I do want to mention. Caleb Geiger, Cara Pryor, Jack Hayden, Connor McManus, all returning to Rugby New York. Those are guys that all, I believe, when I was doing the math, finished within the top 200, if not the top 150 of fantasy players. And there are some big names in there, including Jack Hayden, who finished, at least in our fantasy scoring format last season, in the top 20. So big faces that are returning to not just Rugby New York, but now
Oh
the
no,
Rugby New
no.
York Ironworkers.
Oh, hey, we can't forget that. They're not just Rugby New York. I'm gonna
Right.
steal something from the Jack Ranger show. You know, I think their name at this point has got to be the Rugby New York Professional Football Rugby Union Organization Professional Football Club, because they just can't decide. But what they can decide on, people, what they can decide on is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because they are bringing back the boys. I mean, Geiger, you know, Pryor, Hayden. I mean, McManus didn't have as much of an impact with Andy Ellis in there, but he's going to need to step. He's going to need to be the guy, the halfback this year, because he's going to be the guy that needs to step up and fill those boots. But I think the big one out of those we got to talk about is Jack Hayden. I mean, you know, once you didn't see him on the Blues roster in New Zealand, you knew that he was probably coming back to the MLR. But it's great to see it official, because he's just a big part of that campaign, and for them to go back to back this year and get another chip.
Yeah, no, obviously a big part of that, like you said, and yeah, obviously some inklings that maybe with how successful he was in the MLR last year, maybe he'd be moving on like a bunch of other guys did and used
And
MLR as a stepping stone.
yeah. And I mean, hey, they just posted some social media posts. They said the boys are back. It seems like all the teams are using the same song to show the boys are back in training camp. Real original guys. But we saw pictures of Ed Fidow, you know, he's probably going to be back, it seems like, because he's clearly on their social media page. I saw Quinn Nawadi in the background with a beautiful beard. But one of the things that we do have to talk about that, you know, maybe went under the radar for this New York team, is that coaching staff that they put together. I mean, you know, they fake it to us and bring in what Kieran Reed and tease. We
Right.
talked about it last year. They tease us with the whole Kieran Reed, Andy Ellis thing, who are just running a clinic for the Tri-City coaches or Tri-State coaches. But then they come up and follow it up with a coaching staff that just has pedigree. And I mean, these guys are really embracing that New Zealand, the old boys All Blacks. They're really embracing that, you know, that into their veins. And I don't know if they're iron workers or more so, you know, they're just old boy All Blacks. So add another name to their list of names that they've had.
And just to name down the list, James Semple, he's from New Zealand, 33 years old, played rugby at Auckland University, Curry Rugby Club in Scotland, a whole bunch of rugby experience, obviously North Harbour in there, and also the Utah Warriors as well. So has a little bit of MLR experience as well. Ben Afieki, I think that's how you say it. Again, pronunciations are going to be a common theme here on the Fantasy Ruckers show. And Ollie Richardson, Steve Lewis, yeah, all guys that are obviously have that rugby pedigree are going to be able to continue the success that Rugby New York has seen so early in their franchise. But a name that I want to mention too, as well, that is kind of shifting from that player role last year, that was a marquee name with that championship win, and what a way to kind of close out the playing career at least. But Andy Ellis now hopping over from the playing side. I know he kind of had that kind of player coach role with Rugby New York last season, but now to take the full on coaching role. How big is that, Matt, to have a guy that was obviously there playing in the trenches with the boys in that
Yeah.
championship run, and now is shifting over to that kind of, mentorship kind of role, and not having the impact, I guess, on the field itself, but still a big part of Rugby New York?
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna assume that not much is gonna change. I mean, the guy was. I mean, we talked to Cole last year. We already talked about the fact that Andy Ellis is essentially, was that player coach. He coached the guys on the field. He was the coach that was within the sidelines. So what he's going to bring was he's just going to be able to bring even more so this year, be more of a mentor for the guys. And I think Connor McManus, the guy that we talked about, is really going to benefit from having him still in the building, because I think that was somebody that, being a nine ourselves, that would definitely be someone who we would look up to and say, hey,
Sure.
tell me what you know, tell us everything. Because McManus, I'm going to say it here, I think he's going to have a big year.
And I guess I could say that it's a position change that you're going to get the same benefits from the teachings that he has, but I'm sure Andy Ellis is going to appreciate the easiness on his body and not having to
Yeah,
take
well, hey,
that
hey, hey,
toll. And
hey, hey, there hasn't been any injuries yet. I was just thinking that, how many injuries at halfback until we see Andy Ellis suddenly
right.
sign like a player coach contract again and just end up winning the championship again. So, let's hold our horses there. He might be a guy that I'm going to pick up by the end of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not far-fetched to think about that, because I know, like, last year, the Toronto Arrows were going through a major, injury, riddled season with that 9 position. They had to
Yeah,
bring back Riley DiNardo, and sign him back to a contract to have
yeah.
him kind of cover that spot. So, I mean, anything can happen, right? So I guess what would be the odds on
I mean,
that?
hey,
I would
hey,
be
the coach,
interested to
the
see.
coach, the coach suited up for the Giltinis. Right?
Sure.
The
Yeah, there
straight
you
right?
go.
He suited up, so it's not unprecedented. So Andy Ellis, he's probably got his boots in his bag every time. So I'm just waiting for it. I'm gonna have my finger on the trigger ready to pick him up this year.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely keep an eye watch. That's the 3D chess that you learned over the break, Matt. The fantasy
Oh
3D
yeah.
chess. Looking out for
Oh
those
yeah.
sleeper guys. They may not
It gets
they
me
might
it
not
gets
have a player
yeah,
contract now.
look, it gets me nowhere, but hey, it's something. It's something. At least people know that I'm thinking.
Yeah, there you go. You're making all the league members, especially the new ones, make at least think that you're doing your homework for sure. All right,
Exactly.
let's move on to some other roster moves here. Another team that was seemed to be really busy during this offseason, the Houston SaberCats. They seem to have made a
Holy.
whole bunch of signings, and not even just like signings that just are like, oh, okay, they make that, but like signings that are like, holy cow, like this is going to have a big
And
impact. And for a
trades.
team, and trades too, and for a team that 2 years removed, essentially finished last in the MLR, and then last season finished pretty good. And obviously, with the help of we're not going to mention the names anymore. We said that last time, but with the controversy that happened, Houston SaberCats kind of buying their ticket into the playoffs, definitely a huge improvement from the season before. And with these roster moves, it does seem like they're looking to make that next step. Some guys that are coming to the Houston SaberCats, Don McKenna, Hanko Gramicius, Nathan
Oh my
Denholt, 3
goodness.
big guys. Those are the big names I'm talking about. And then you also have just recently the returning of Robbie Povey as well to the Houston SaberCats. So, Matt, for those guys that are listed there, man, it looks like Houston is going to be a team to reckon with when we
I
enter this
mean,
2023 year.
let's just look at that forward pack room. I mean, they're one of the teams that released their roster, right? And I'm looking at this for I mean, that forward pack room, you got Hanko, we know what he does, and we've seen him literally knock the lights out of people. So,
Yep.
you know, that's Houston's going to be a team that we're going to have to look out for. And let's not just look at some of the guys that we know. I mean, look at some of these signings overseas. These guys are turning in. They're taking a a page out of the New York and whatever Ironworkers, whoever they are playbook, and they're picking up a bunch of the All Blacks, or not All Blacks, but a bunch of guys from New Zealand. They pick up, and somebody that everybody should kind of look out for is Rob Cobb. What a name, right? Rob Cobb, but coming straight out of Waikato. You know, yeah, let's take a look out for these guys. These guys are making moves. They're going for a chip. I think Houston's got to be a team that you got to watch for.
And as a Chiefs fan in Super Rugby, I do love seeing Waikato guys come into the MLR. It does make me super super excited to see that. But yeah, the Houston SaberCats, man, they are making moves, and I know Steven in our league is definitely going to be happy about that. And him being a hardcore SaberCats fan, he'll be excited
Oh
heading
yeah.
into this 2023 year, and I would be
I don't
too
know if I'm
because
ready. I don't know if I'm ready for his excitement, but hey, they're going to be a team to watch. That's for sure.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, rounding out some of the key names that also signed to other teams as well. Jason Higgins, Matt, you're familiar with him. He had a little bit of success for you there
Oh,
towards the tail end of last fantasy rugby season. I think what did he put
oh
you up,
yeah.
like a 25-point game with that three-try performance last year?
Oh, it did
He's
you good.
returning. He's returning to San Diego. Wayne Vanderbank, he's returning to New England. He was obviously a huge part of the success that New England saw last year. Obviously, not enough to get them that championship, but the best team, I would think, that everyone would agree on, the regular season team of last season. He was a big part of that, and a big part of our fantasy rugby league as well, on that fact too. And then you have Calvin Whiting returning to the Utah Warriors as well. I know Vandy will be
Yep.
happy to see that as well. And looking now, shifting over to kind of the more recent MLR signings that happened over the course of this past week. Matt, you mentioned Rob Cobb, but it looks like there's a whole bunch of guys. You mentioned Waikato, a whole bunch of guys that are coming over from the NPC to the MLR.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on kind of that whole shift and seeing guys that are coming from overseas, particularly from that league?
I mean, look, like I thought that we saw the bulk of it before the new year. I thought guys were like teams were kind of coming together before the new year, but it seems like after the new year and kind of close to the end of the year, these teams are putting up signings. And I think the big thing is that we're seeing is these NPC guys are wanting to come out to North America and play. I mean, we have a huge New Zealand presence in this league already, and they're just kind of banking on that and continuing to bring guys in from NPC. And it works out perfect because I think this is going to be a trend for the future. And this is great for the league. I mean, what we're going to see is these NPC guys are going to go back to New Zealand in the offseason of the MLR, play that season, see if they can get a bid in that Super Rugby on a Super Rugby team. If they can't do it, they come back here, they play in North America. They're a bit higher level of talent than most of the guys here that are playing, and you come here and you put a show on and you see if you can get paid the next year. So I think it's just going to be a trend that we're going to continue to see. And the other thing that's huge to mention is that these guys are not older guys coming from NPC. I mean, these guys are young guys. There's some 23-year-olds, some mid 20s that are coming over here to try and make a name for themselves and build a career here. So it's great to see. It's awesome to see. I love it. It's only going to elevate this league, and we're just going to continue to see more. And I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, no, it is great to see. That's a great point. Just how it's not just old guys that are coming over. There was kind of that kind of similar to the MLS. There's this stigma that maybe the MLR is just a place for, older guys to kind of
The
have that
retirement
last
home, right?
hurrah. Exactly. So no, it is cool to see that with the whole timing of both those leagues that they are able to use the MLR as kind of a way to showcase their talent and yeah, take
Yeah.
that next step up, which is really, really cool to see. So yeah, it's felt like we've had a whole flurry of roster moves. Obviously, our fantasy league is going to have to pay a lot of attention to where these guys are now, who these new guys are now, where they come
Yeah.
from, because there'll be guys, I can guarantee you, that won't get drafted in our draft, which we will talk about in just a
Mhm.
moment's time here, that will be big pickups either heading into that first week because you see them in a starting lineup, or after that first week because they make such a big impact. And
Yeah.
they're guys that, you might not be aware of because you're just not familiar with those names coming from
And
NPC. So
yeah.
it'll be cool to see that.
And you know what? I'm just this is a message to the league members and especially the new league members. All right. This is a message to league members. The more guys from New Zealand that come over to the MLR, the more scared you guys should be. All right, that's where I that's my kind of where I watch my rugby.
Your
I
bread and
watch
butter.
everything from the NPC. That's my bread and butter. Exactly, Ryan. It's my bread and butter. I watch it from NPC up to Super Rugby. So watch out. I keep an eye on these guys. I keep tabs on these guys. I've had sticky notes on these guys for years. So you guys better watch out.
All right.
That's
Well,
why I
that's
love
that.
to see it, really. I don't really, the MLR, great, the talent's going up, but really, I'm going to know more players. I'm going to have more background on more players. I'm going to be first in 8 years. All right. You watch out, boys
All
and
right. We'll
ladies.
see. We'll see 8 names for you guys that are listening. The championship jersey is behind me right now, and
Yep.
for those who win our Fantasy Ruckers League, get their name etched on this jersey
Hmm.
to basically join the record books. And maybe it'll be 7 names before yours, Matt. But it sounds like you're
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
confident that your name at some point is going to get on this jersey. Something else that's our fantasy league members, and I think just people who are interested in fantasy rugby and want to get a part of it, if that's something that they're trying to start getting familiar with, is starting to look out for some of these rosters that are being released by these
Oh, yeah.
teams, because this is where you're starting to get your real information. This is where the real homework begins for the fantasy MLR season. Because Matt, in the tail end of the 2022 off season was a lot about speculation, right? It was a lot about, okay,
Mhm.
this guy's moving here, this guy's coming overseas, but we weren't quite certain how these lineups or how these rosters were going to necessarily look. And you throw in the dispersal draft in there, you throw in the addition of the Chicago Hounds, just a whole lot of kind of things that were maybe not set in stone. But teams now
Yep.
are starting to release those rosters, and that
Thank
includes the
goodness.
Houston SaberCats, the NOLA Gold, All Glory DC, most recently at the time of this recording of this episode, and the Utah Warriors also at the tail end of 2022 releasing their roster as
Yep.
well. So we're going to start seeing some of these rosters starting to get pushed out. And this is something that fantasy league members in our league and guys that are interested in hopefully joining fantasy rugby in the near future, when we are able to expand this to more people, is this is something you're going to want to
Yep.
look out for, because these are the guys
Hey,
that you'll want to draft in the 2023 year.
and I just want to kind of take us all back to a year ago, this time when we were just a baby. As a Fantasy Rucker Show was just a little boy, and we were starting to come out of the the ruins and really growing into this beautiful tree that we have now. Just a year ago, we didn't have this type of knowledge of the rosters. And I remember sitting there going into the draft thinking, is this guy even going to be on the team? This guy was on the team. Is he going to be on the team this year? And we had no idea. So the fact that teams are now coming out with this, and I think the more teams that are coming out with rosters is kind of pushing for other teams to do that as well, is just going to be great for the landscape of fantasy rugby and what we're trying to do here.
And Matt, you mentioned 1 year ago during our little baby stages. Did you
Yeah.
know that it is almost 1 year to the day that we have released our first episode. Our first episode coming
Oh
out in
my
January
gosh.
12th of
Oof.
2022. So approaching that 1 year, and again, we mentioned at the
Mm.
top of the show, we can't thank our supporters and can't thank everyone who watches
Yep.
this episode, listens to this episode. To have this go on a year and just makes us want to go even further and make fantasy rugby a
Sure does.
staple of Major League Rugby. So no, that's awesome stuff. So
But hey, we
yeah,
can't we can't get too nostalgic, Ryan. Not yet. We can't get too
no,
nostalgic. We got to
you're
talk about these rosters because I got some things I got to say. I
you're
got
right.
some
You're right.
things
All
I
right.
got to say.
Let's talk about. I mean, is there anything particular in the roster moves that you've seen, Matt, that really sticks out to you? We had, like I said, Houston,
Yeah.
NOLA, Old Glory DC, and Utah. Out of all these, and you can go check out these if you're listening or viewing. You can go check out their Twitter pages where they've released these
Yep.
names. I'm not going to go through all of them, but after going through all of these roster announcements, is there anything in particular that kind of sticks out to you that fantasy managers need to know?
Yeah. I mean, I already mentioned the Houston SaberCats forward pack. I think that forward pack is going to be absolutely killer. So I already mentioned them. The other thing I want to bring out is this NOLA Gold roster. My eyes immediately, and we talked about this last year, my eyes immediately went to the halfbacks. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
see what that halfback room looked like. They drafted Villani, right? They signed Luke Campbell, and we were
Yep.
thinking, Luke Campbell, does that mean Damian Stevens out? Nope. Nola Gold says we're bringing both of them back. They got all three of them back in the room. All three of them back in the room. I don't know what this is going to look like in the season. I don't know what this looks like for fantasy wise, because you had three, and Damian Stevens, he's a
Sure.
quality halfback in this league. We've seen him be able to put up points. And Luke Campbell, we know he has the pedigree. Villani's going to learn from those guys, but that's really interesting to me. I'm really interested to see how that looks and the season goes. And then, I was looking out for a lot of the collegiate guys that got drafted. I obviously had to look out for Old Glory DC to make sure that our boy Calixto Martinez, old Cali,
Yep.
was on that roster. He was there loud and proud. So I love to see it, supporting the boys. But yeah, that Nola Gold halfback room is going to be interesting for me. It honestly makes me kind of think that Luke Campbell is not a guy to draft just because of the depth there. You go 50-50. We've seen guys, we've seen quality halfback split time. So, we'll have to see. But
Yeah.
I think that'll be super interesting.
And that's a great point, Matt, because I think that really is highlights the difference between, the success in fantasy rugby and the success on real rugby, for a lack of better terms. I mean, it obviously is a fantastic thing for the NOLA Gold to have these three halfbacks, right? Having Luke Campbell, having Damian Stevens, having Sebastian Villani through the course of the season. Injuries happen. There are going to be times where they're going to
Yeah.
need that halfback depth. But from a fantasy perspective, maybe not so much for fantasy managers. I mean, you mentioned it, Matt. There are going to be times where guys are going to be coming out at the half or with 60 minutes left. Maybe, with our bonus points that we have in our scoring with the 70 plus
Right.
minutes and the 80 plus minutes, you may not be able to achieve that with some of these guys because they're just not on the field long enough. And you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons when it comes to these halfbacks. Yeah, this guy might be really talented. You mentioned Luke Campbell as being a guy that may be a high draft pick if he gets that playing time. Is he good enough to make an impact in the 50 or 60 minutes that he's on the pitch before Sebastian Villani or before Damian Stevens comes on, or vice versa? We don't quite know who the starters are going to be yet. But nonetheless,
Yeah.
same point given. Are you going to be able to trust these guys to put up points for you in that limited time that they're on the pitch? It's going to be an interesting way to kind of approach that. I know some league members kind of side on, I just want guys that are on the field that have the chance
Mhm.
of scoring points for me. And then there's going to be guys that are going to be like, hey, I just want the best players there because these are the guys that are the difference makers. It's going to be an interesting way how people kind of
It's
approach that.
and it's going to be a tough decision this year because with the whole dispersal draft, with those quality guys being made available to all these teams, I think one thing that we've already seen, and the other thing that I wanted to point out with these 4 squad releases is the depth. I mean, we're not just like yes, this I wanted to point out the Nola goal, but that's not the only place that we're seeing it. I mean, I talked about the Houston Sabercats forward pack, right? Look at the back row, right? Gideon Van Vyk, uh, Danny Barrett. We got Hanko Gramicius now. We got Naso Keke. That's 4 guys. How are you going to get all those guys playing time? Because all those guys are quality guys that deserve to be on the pitch for at least 60 to 70 minutes, right? So this isn't going to be the only place we're going to see it. This isn't the last, the decisions are going to have to be made by these fantasy team managers about whether they want to value, like you said, value those guys that are just quality players or value the time the guys that they see are getting the time on the pitch. So, and you'll just have to be lucky about if you get a guy that does both.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be an interesting take on that, and we'll have to wait and see because I'm very excited how these
Mhm.
fantasy managers, especially in our league, are going to kind of approach this whole thing because
Exactly.
it'll be interesting. And I will mention too, obviously we've teased it kind of all off season long. We talked about it towards the tail end of last season about adding these additional stats and the impact that those stats will have.
Yeah.
I am still in the works. We're still working to try to finalize these things and try to get the stats that we want for our league. But that is going to obviously have a big impact on how you're going to perceive some of these guys. If we have to continue and we're not able to get the stats that we have been talking about all season long, it's going to be, I think, a little bit more heavily weighted on the guys who are on the pitch because it's so scoring heavy, because it's so reliant on being on the field to score tries and, being on the field for 70 minutes, being on the field for 80 minutes, that 0.5, that +1 is not necessarily going to be a difference maker. You're really looking for guys that are going to be boom or bust guys, and you're going to kind of hedge your bets if to have a guy on the field or on the pitch for 80 minutes and in order to have a Jason Higgins like game and score 3 tries. So it'll be interesting to see that. We are going to talk
Yep.
about those stats later on in this show and kind of the state at which we're at with that. We're going to give our league members a nice little update here in just a moment's time. But that is something that people and especially our league members are going to have to keep in mind as they start doing their preparations for the draft and for their kind of team construction heading into 2023. I will just quickly mention here before we move on from all these roster moves and we can finally take a deep breath. But Utah, like I mentioned, also announced their roster towards the tail end of 2022. Big names
Yeah.
on there as well. It's cool to see, guys returning. Paul Lasike is coming back. He was also named one of the captains for this team as well. And I wanted to mention our Emerson Pryor, your friend, also being on the team as well. So obviously Utah looking to make that next step as well after what was a somewhat of a rough 2022 for them, and they'll look to make improvements in 2023. So does that feel all good, Matt? That all the roster moves out of the way, finally caught up, feel good for 2023?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the connection must have been telling us something about, we've been talking a lot about these roster moves, and it's time to get to how these guys look on the field, right? I mean, they got to put out a brand, they got to put out a display. So, I mean, some of these teams are coming out with some pretty nice jerseys, and some of these teams, maybe not so much. So, I mean,
Exactly.
definitely
Great
something
segue.
that we got to touch on here.
Yeah, great segue there, Matt. Let's hop into that, into some of these kits that are now being released by these teams. We'll start off with the most recent one, the Chicago Hounds, the newest team added to the MLR. Matt, I know you were a little bit questionable on the name. It's kind of grown on me over the course of the end of 2022 and 2023. I think with the former team names that have been a part of this league, I've kind of have found a newfound appreciation for at least a somewhat okay or good name. And I think Chicago Hounds pass. And hey, their jerseys look not too bad either. Nothing special to me, nothing terrible, but you can check it out on we found it on their
They-
Reddit page. They look
yeah,
nice. They look good.
they definitely played it safe. They definitely played it safe. It looks clean, it looks nice. It's very simple. There's not that much green in it. It's a little bit more just kind of black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not too much green. I mean, I would be interested to see what type of jersey concept you'd come out for the Chicago Churros. I think that would have been electric. But
I
it
don't
is
know.
what it is.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know how I feel about the kind of the dashes all over. From a distance, it
yeah.
looks kind of cool. But when I'm looking at these jerseys up close now, it looks a little bit funky.
Hey,
I mean, that is where the green part comes from on their white
yeah,
jerseys. I think it looks a little bit better on the white. The black with the white kind
yeah.
of dash looks a little bit funny. But
Hey, I'm
like you
just
said, they're
thinking.
playing
I'm
safe.
just thinking.
Yeah.
You got to think. Imagine, that meme or that picture where they show the lungs with the dog inside of it, right?
The,
Hey, they're
the
hounds.
yeah, okay.
Imagine if they had a dog just on the chest, so they all got that dog in them. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see what
You know
you're
what I mean?
saying.
How cool would that have been?
That
How
would have
cool
been
would
the
that
that
have
would have
been?
been the opposite of playing it safe, Matt. I think
Hey,
that
yeah.
would have been
You're
definitely
an
making a
expansion
statement.
team.
But
You got to come out swinging here. You're in one of the
fair
biggest
enough.
sports
Hey,
market. You just got to come out swinging here.
fair enough. I mean, you look at expansion teams in other leagues, in other sports leagues around North America. I mean, you talk about the
Yeah,
Seattle Kraken; they were pretty bold with what they came out with. The Vegas Golden
yeah.
Knights; they were pretty bold with what they had. So yeah. Hey, well, I
You
guess we'll
missed out a
see.
perfect marketing opportunity, Hounds. All right, I'm giving this to you for free. You don't even have to pay me for this, but you can just market the fact that your team's got that dog in them. Everybody loves saying it these days. Let's see if your team can show it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move to another team that had released their kit as well. The Utah Warriors. They released their kit in at the beginning of December. We touched on it, I think, in an episode before. Got Vandy's reaction about it. But again, pretty cool jerseys. I mean, I'm really a big fan of the black jerseys that they have. The alternate white ones, kind of a little bit iffy on, and I do love the red stripes coming across the front as well. So those main kits there, they do look very very nice. Don't need to, I think we already had our reaction that
Oh,
other
yeah, yeah,
episode,
yeah.
so I don't think we need to spend too much time on it. The one jersey though that so far I think takes the icing on the cake right now is the San Diego Legion. I know a lot of people I saw on socials a little bit kind of split between people liking them and not liking them. I don't know how big of a fan. I've never been a big fan, and I obviously I appreciate the military and I appreciate all of that, but I don't know, and I get the ties with San Diego. I just not sure how much I love the camo jerseys. They do it in
Oh,
football
but
as well. not a
Those
big
other
fan.
jerseys, right?
But those black
Oh,
jerseys and those white jerseys, that home and away kit by San Diego,
you know what?
it's very hard, like you said, to put, a big
Yeah,
logo on a jersey
yeah.
like that. But I think San Diego has done it right. That
Oh,
Trojan helmet
look.
on the side looks fantastic.
Oh yeah, and just the absolute great mix, and I think James Dealey pointed this out that that their sponsor on the front of their jersey, it isn't a new sponsor. I think it's just like a sister company or like a company that's owned by their main sponsor. I forget the name, but Kings and Convicts to go with the Trojan helmet and the
Yep,
font
yep,
and the helmet. Oh, it
yep.
just looks beautiful. I mean, Vandy must be kicking himself right now. The fact that he had to choose Utah Warriors because deep down, he looks at these jerseys, and I know exactly deep down he said, "Ah, Big Joe looking so good in that," and he's just dreaming about it in his head, and other things are going on while he's dreaming about that. We don't want to get into this. It's a PG show, but I'm sure
It
he
is.
loved it, and he wishes he could choose another team right now, but he
It,
can't go
it
back
is.
now. I'm not letting you, Vandy.
No, no. I mean, the Utah Warriors jerseys are sweet. They look really, really nice.
Uh,
So,
hey,
I mean,
you're
and
no
still, but
Kings and
San Diego.
Convict, that's for sure.
Sure. And I mean, it is funny that you mentioned that because I think it's not so much, I mean, it's starting to leak in a little bit in the power four sports in North America with sponsors and
Yeah,
things like that. But this is something that has been traditionally things that fans have been aware of in the space of soccer. It's
yeah,
part of the jersey. When it comes to sponsors, it is part of the jersey and it's
yeah,
part of the look of the jersey. And I know, like, I'm a Liverpool fan, and I know that it was a big deal when Carlsberg was the sponsor for Liverpool, and that was on their jersey. It looked really nice, and then when they shifted over to Standard Charter, a little bit more questionable, doesn't look as nice. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The Kings and Convicts there, it fits perfectly on
yeah.
that kit.
And
I really
and
really do
hey,
like it.
underrated note, the socks, the fact that they have SD right across the front of the socks and that awesome font, underrated little part. You don't see logos on socks too often. You usually just see the classic stripes, the classic base colors.
That is
But
true.
hey, the ST on the socks, bold move all around by San Diego Legion, coming in hot with the nice sponsorship, like you said, almost as good as the putting the dude wipes right on your butt, you know.
That is true.
I love it anyways. It looks awesome. I think San Diego Legion right now, they're leading the pack in jersey releases, but we'll see. Who knows? Maybe New York will come out with I don't even know what you can come up with ironworkers. Let's not even get into it. Let's move on. I don't even know. I couldn't
Yes.
even come up with something clever there because it's just so silly. It's just such a ridiculous. I'm sorry, Matt McCarthy. I know maybe you love it, but I don't even know what you can come up with. What do you put a hammer just on the front of the logo? That's it. Just put a hammer. That's it. Hammers and nails.
I
It's
guess we'll
almost as
find
good as
out.
putting a dog in front of the hounds. I guess.
I guess we'll find out. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how all these other teams come out with, but they are starting to trickle out. Just along with the rosters, these jerseys are starting to get released, and it's all part of the fun heading into the 2023 year. So we'll definitely keep an eye
Sure
out for
is.
that. All right, let's shift on to some other bigger news here. Something that was announced at the beginning of this year, and it's super super exciting stuff for us, for the entire league, and the growth of rugby in North America is Major League Rugby's partnership with Fox Sports. And they have announced their national television schedule for this season. And they got some pretty good matchups slated for this year. And they also have a
Yeah.
match on Fox Sports 1, which is a big deal, I
Oh,
think, for the MLR as well. That is going to be the matchup between the Seattle Seawolves and the New York Ironworkers, 9:30 p.m.
oh,
Eastern Time, Fox Sports 1, February 18th, opening weekend.
New York, who?
The
Sorry,
New York
sorry,
Islanders.
sorry, sorry. I know who we're talking about. I know who but oh my god, no, hey, can we talk about while we're talking about the season? By the way, great that we're getting a FS1. Fox Sports One game that's not even playoffs. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a huge
yeah.
game, but the fact that we're getting one, it's just showing the growth of
Beginning of the
this game.
season. Opening
Oh
opening
yeah,
weekend.
yeah, as Mr. George Killebrew called it, Big Boy Fox. I love it. I love to see it. But while we're talking about opening weekend, think about that opening weekend. Like we've got the rematch of the finals, right? The
Mhm.
Seawolves versus the Rugby New York United Ironworkers, right?
Yep.
We got the Fire and Ice Cup of Atlanta versus Toronto, right?
Yep.
We got the Texas Cup, if that's still a thing. James Dealey tweeted said, Is that still a thing?" But hey, it's a Battle of Texas, regardless. I mean, that's going to be a crazy opening weekend,
Yep.
and I'm counting down the days, right?
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting. So yeah, really, really pumped for that opening weekend, and obviously a lot of other people who are not in the areas of those teams are going to be able to get those coverage
Mhm.
of some of those games. San Diego
Oh
Legion, Utah
yeah,
Warriors, Matt, you mentioned will be on Fox Sports 2 that day, and then throughout the year, there's going to be other matchups too. The Houston Saber against Nola Gold on February 25th, Fox Sports 2, and then 3 more matchups in March. So just really, really exciting stuff. I think the overall theme here is that the league is growing and the league is taking
yeah,
steps to be really something that establishes itself within the
uh
North
huh,
American sports scene. And as people that
yeah,
have been following rugby for so long and playing it and just, how many times, Matt, have we had to find some sort of, bootleg stream of some get
oh,
match overseas because there wasn't anything
oh
here to
yeah,
watch, trying to find some matchups. And now that we have the rugby network, now we have matchups on Fox Sports. It just makes it so much more accessible to watch rugby, which is going to help
yeah.
not only existing fans digest the sport and get involved in MLR, but also new fans as well who are maybe flipping the channels. They get onto Fox Sports 1 on Saturday and see this matchup between New York and Seattle, and they may stick around a bit and may find some new
And
rugby fans.
And hey, a quick little plug. You talk about breaking into that North American scene. You got Fox Sports. You're breaking into the cable networks. You got Rugby Network. You're getting everybody to be able to watch for free. One thing that's a staple in North American sport is fantasy sports. And hey, MLR. We're one step away. We're right here. Anytime you want, anytime you really want to go big in North America, we're ready for you.
Exactly. That is, I would hope
All right,
that is the
I had to
next.
throw in the self plug, right?
No, it's all good, man. I hope that fantasy sports, or at least fantasy rugby in particular, is on the radar of MLR, and hopefully that is the next step because we'd love to
Yep.
see it, and it would definitely, as commissioner, would help me out not having to
Yeah.
spend all day and night crunching out those numbers on a weekly basis. Believe me, I've been preparing myself mentally to get that ready ahead of the 2023 year. So we're
Yeah.
definitely going
And
to see that.
And quick thing about just speaking while we're talking about the season, what was also I think also went a little bit under the radar is the preseason games. I mean,
Yep.
teams were announcing preseason matches and the dates of preseason matches. I forget what some of the matchups are. I think
Yeah, I
somebody's
can
playing
list
the
some.
Arrows.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
list
list
some out, right?
some out here. So Houston announced their preseason matchups. One's going to be on Jan 28th against the NOLA Gold, Feb 8th
Yeah,
against the New England Free Jacks, Old Glory DC taking on Rugby New York on the 3rd of February, Toronto Arrows on February 10th, and then you got the Seattle Sea Wolves facing the Glendale Raptors. So this is our first kind of like out of league preseason matchup.
it's the
The Glendale Ra-
Salar versus the Malar.
yeah, nice. But yeah, didn't they change the name though? Now it is what Super Rugby Americas now that they're being a part
It's
of.
the
So
Salar versus the Malar.
they'll be taking on the Glendale Raptors on February 5th, and then February 8th they'll be facing a local Seattle
Yeah.
men's club as well. So yeah, cool to see. And Matt, like you mentioned, it will be something that league members and fantasy MLR players
Oh
will
yeah.
have to look out for because this is where you're going to see guys, starting to
And
establish themselves in the
yeah.
lineup, see how they actually play on an MLR pitch. Are these guys going to be someone you consider coming up on that draft day? Who knows? You'll probably find some nice information there and some nuggets there in those preseason matches.
Yeah, and hey, look, you're going to also see some of those collegiate guys coming out of the draft, some of those academy guys that we're seeing being signed, really try and make a name for some themselves. Those guys are fighting for potential, starting jobs, get into that 23. Only 23 guys can be in there, and some of these young guys are going to make a name for themselves, not only with their club, but also with the league members, and see if they can get on one of the fantasy Rucker fantasy league teams as well.
Yeah, we'll see. And maybe we got to make that more known. Maybe that provide a little bit more motivation. Maybe shoot Callie a text and say, "Hey man, if you
Oh,
really want someone to draft you this fantasy
hey,
rugby season, you're gonna have to show up in that preseason in
he
some of these
doesn't need it.
preseason
He's
matchups."
got all the juice. He's already got all the juice. He's ready to go.
All right, and
I
and
can
and
sense it.
I guess this is a perfect kind of transition into, I guess, the ways that teams are finding talent, and it isn't only
Oh,
through the MLR draft that some of these guys are joining the league, and there's some other
another
avenues
type
of
of draft.
finding way. finding ways to the MLR. The Utah Warriors held that Crossroads Cup not too long
Yep.
ago. I believe there was I think at least a few or a couple of players that were able to make it onto a Utah Warriors squad from that tournament. And then we also have an announcement from the MLR's newest team that the Hounds will be hosting a open. The keyword is open combine for a potential spot maybe on the Chicago Hounds roster, according to them. As long as you're 18 years old and you know how to fill out the
Oh,
form that is on their website, you'll
I
be
know
able to
how.
participate
Wow.
in this MLR combine for the Chicago Hounds on January 29th at SeatGeek Stadium Dome in Bridgeview, Illinois. Hey, maybe this is Vandy's chance to maybe suit it up. We got about 20
Hey,
days
look,
here to get
look, I
him
think
ready
I
up.
told you this. I told you this before the show, Ryan. If we get 1,000 likes on this episode right now, 1,000 likes, okay? All right,
Yep.
everybody, listen, 1,000 likes. Vandy and I will both drive over to Illinois. I will learn how to fill out that form for the open combine, and I will run the combine. And I just to let you know, I haven't ran over 10 meters in years. Years, people. I will do it. I will do it if we get a
Hey, it's
thousand
it's
likes.
Matt.
I'm all for it. I
It's been
will.
all it's been all
Yeah.
strategic, man. You had that knee injury a while back. You've been giving it
Yep.
rest, man. But now's the time to show up,
You're
and
right.
the Chicago Hounds combine is your perfect calling.
Yeah. And hey, if we start getting closer, I'm gonna have to learn how to pass the ball again because I think I might have forgotten. So we'll see. We'll see.
We'll
I'll
see.
start. I'll start with the form, and then we'll see how I get to passing a ball.
Hey, mark it down here. 1,000 likes. We'll send Matt and Vandy over to to the Chicago Hounds MLR Combine. That would be definitely a sight to see. And I guess speaking of the Chicago Hounds, we did mention and talk about a predicted starting 15. I think this is a big
We did.
conversation. The Chicago Hounds is obviously one of the headlines heading into 2023, being the newest team in the MLR, and we predicted a starting 15 in an episode not too long after the dispersal draft. And obviously, since then, there have been certain roster moves that have happened and things like that. So I'm going to pull up what we had as our starting 15, at least predicted after we saw the dispersal draft results. And obviously, you're going to see a lot of familiar names on here. And
I
since
we
then,
did
we're going to be throwing
we
up
did pretty
here
well.
the team or the players that have confirmed and signed with the Chicago Hounds. And yeah, Matt, I think we did pretty well here outside of
We did pretty.
Nathan Den Hote, who is, like we mentioned earlier in the show, was traded over to the Houston SaberCats. A lot of these guys are coming to Chicago, and it looks like it is going to be the strong team that we predicted the Chicago Hounds franchise would be.
I mean, look, I'm not gonna go. I'll be the first to say it that I admit I did not expect all these guys to sign for the Chicago Hounds. But what we heard from Rugby Wrap Up when we had Matt and Zach on the show, they talked about talking to the head coach of that team, the former coach of the Go Gronies, and his influence and his relationship with these guys. I can't be surprised anymore. I mean, this is a quality team. Uh, they're coming in with the best back of the year from last year. That back line is already looking ridiculous. The forward pack is looking great. They're making additions on top of that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the Hounds are looking good, and we were talking about when you first showed us this team, just how good this team looked. It's formulating right in front of our eyes, and we're seeing that Chicago Hounds are going to be a contender right away.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening, you can check out our YouTube video of this episode online. We have a graphic up on the screen with our predicted Chicago starting 15 and the players on that list that have been confirmed. Those include Hugh Roach, Charlie Abel, Luke White, Luke Beauchamp, McLean Jones, Sidney Shoup, Luke Carty, Bryce Campbell, Billy Meeks, Chris Matina, and
Ridiculous.
Mark O'Keefe. Those are all big time names, all guys that had major impacts, not only obviously in the MLR season, but also in fantasy MLR as
Like,
well.
what the
Huge
heck is
names,
up with that center core, Ryan?
right?
Like
Crazy.
Bryce Campbell, Billy Meeks, and Mark O'Keefe.
Yep.
Like we just talked about depth for like 20 minutes, just talking about how deep this league has gotten. And now we're looking at a Chicago Hounds team that has like probably like three of the top five centers in the league. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, what are you even going to choose from here? Who are you going to draft out of these three? Obviously Billy
Exactly.
Meeks, but
Right.
then Mark O'Keefe's also class. Bryce Campbell was also class. All these guys are they're top ranked in the league in last year. So It's just ridiculous. I love it. This is gonna be a great year. It's just making me more excited for the year. I can't stop
Yeah,
saying
and like you mentioned, Matt, there are some guys that have been moved to the Chicago Hounds that we obviously didn't know of at the
it.
time of this Chicago starting 15 when the dispersal draft happened. But yeah, they made huge additions. You're adding JP Elaw from NOLA, Lindsey Stevens comes over from the Arrows, Michael DeWall, a huge one who is I think going to slot
Oh,
in that
yeah.
Nathan Den Hote spot, coming over from Dallas. You got Mike Matarazzo, Patty Ryan, Dakota Worth as
Oh,
well coming from Old Glory DC. So not only are
yeah.
these the names that we predicted from this dispersal draft, but names in addition to that. And I think it's just going to be a whole lot of fun to see how this Chicago Hounds team kind of plays out. It's a lot of fun. It's super, super exciting. Obviously, you can have your kind of inklings on how a team that in its first year is able to get this strong. But hey, they're still going to have to put the product out on the field. It doesn't necessarily
Yep.
mean that they're going to be great right off the bat. They're definitely setting themselves up for success though. And I gotta give props, and I gotta say that it's probably a big part of all these signings and the reason why you're so surprised that a lot of these guys have committed to Chicago. Sam Harris coming over
Oh, yeah.
from Austin the year before. I think he's really establishing something in Chicago. We talked about him last episode with Matt McCarthy, with Rugby
Yeah.
Wrap Up, about kind of the impact that he's had, and how great of a coach and leader that he is. I'm sure he's a big, 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 big part of the Chicago Hounds and the steps that they've been able to make ahead of 2023.
Yeah, and just quickly while we're on the topic of, Chicago Hounds coming out as a new team with this crazy team, let's not have a pity party or a pity parade for the Dallas Jackals because the Dallas Jackals are making huge signings themselves this year.
Mhm.
They are coming to play this year, you know, as a new team, a newer team. It's their second year in the league. Um, they're going to come out swinging as well. They're not a team that they're also a team that's going to have lots of depth. And the fact that we've kind of shrunk the teams down in this league by one is we're seeing exactly what we expected to see: depth, talent, all across the board, everywhere. And Chicago Hounds team is another example of that.
And that's something exciting too to say, Matt, is that it wasn't I like the fact that it wasn't just, dispersal draft, everyone gets signed. This is a super team that we got. You know what I mean? We've had movement. We've had
Oh,
guys that have been
yeah.
shipped away from Chicago. We had guys that have chosen to go elsewhere, on that weren't drafted, that decided to move on from either LA or Austin to other clubs in the MLR. So yeah,
Mhm.
like you said, it's only I think it just really emphasizes, I think, how well the MLR kind of in hindsight now looking back on it, how well they approached that whole situation and have been able to set themselves up for what is going to be a competitive 2023. So really super exciting stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And talking about all these roster moves and all this movement, I got to give a shout out. We've mentioned him a couple times on the show already, but I got to give a shout out to MLR Stats, James Dealey, and all the work that he does. A lot of these signings that I've had to, put together and jot down to in order to get this catch up put on has been with the help of him, with all the posts that he does on a weekly basis. Just adds to what is the growing of the MLR and really getting information out there, and to the fans and to followers of these teams to really be involved and be invested into the moves that these teams are making. It's super, super exciting stuff. So if you aren't already, you got to follow him at MLR Stats. It's super exciting stuff on Instagram and at Jam Delay on Twitter as well. Just really great MLR content. He just put out a post about just all the trades, Matt. I don't know if you saw it, but it was like a
Yeah,
trade
I
tree
saw it.
or I
Oh,
shouldn't say tree, a trade circle of all the trades that have happened through the course of this offseason. We talked about
yeah.
how busy this offseason has been. It feels like compared to off seasons in the past, and to have his help and have it visualize it has been super this offseason. And that post itself kind of put everything in a nice little bow just to kind of emphasize how crazy it's been in the 2022-2023 offseason year.
Yeah, I mean, hey, he's coming out firing this year with lots of big wins, with big posts. But he's got to get him out of the way. The season's coming. He's about to take a lot of big L's this year. So we'll he's got to get some wins somewhere. So I'm glad he can get that on Twitter.
Yeah, he's gonna have to start shifting that focus over a little bit more to fantasy MLR because, like we said, the season is quickly approaching, and that draft is coming up soon. So yeah, super exciting stuff. I just want to finish off on a lighter note. A really really cool thing that kind of happened, and just to add to kind of the hype that is going into this 2023 year. I don't know if you guys have seen it, if you're listening or watching, but a Twitter account by the name of Designing Rugby at designing_rugby put out a couple graphics of, I guess, I don't know how you'd put it, but I guess artwork of what kind of would look like these team
AI
mascots and stuff.
generated artwork, Ryan. Everybody's on the AI train. You got to hop on it.
All right, I'll have to look into it more, but just super cool stuff. I mean, Rugby Atlanta's post looks cool, like the
Yeah.
snake with the armor on it. The New England
Yeah.
Free Jacks guy looking patriotic. The Iron
Yeah.
Workers, they even managed to
No,
make
no,
him.
don't say he looks cool. Don't
He looks
say he
pretty
looks
cool,
cool.
man. He's got the
He's a
hammer,
guy in
dude, but
a
he's
tank
jacked.
top with a hammer and a construction hat on, looking out the window. Well,
But you
well,
see the Empire State Building in the back. That's your workplace, man. You see it in the back. That is New York.
he- he's this guy's looking out the window. That guy's not working on any iron. All right. This guy has a hard hat on just for fun. This guy put it on for the picture. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. He's never put nail to wood ever in his life. That's what that guy looked like.
There you
All
go. All
right.
right. Well, then moving on, Nola Gold looks pretty cool. Yeah, if you want to
Yeah.
check it out, really really cool stuff. It just kind of adds to the MLR community and how it's growing and how
Mhm.
people are really hopping aboard about just making this a league that just, it feels like it's getting bigger and bigger with stuff like this. So it's really cool to see. You check that out at designing_rugby on Twitter. It's pretty cool.
Definitely check
Cool
out the
images
Arrows
there.
one. That one was awesome.
Yeah, the Arrows one
Arrows
does
one
look
was
pretty
awesome.
cool. He does look pretty sweet. So yeah, go check that out on socials. I know that it caught some traction with the Rugby Network as well. So really, really cool stuff. All right, man. The news and notes.
That was
I
a
think
lot
we're
of
finally.
news. That was a lot
I
of
know.
notes.
I think we're finally caught up with the 20 what happened in the tail end of 2022 and the start of 2023, and I think we can now start
And then
looking
tomorrow we're gonna
ahead.
have more to catch up on.
Exactly. But hey,
Tomorrow we're gonna
now
have more to catch up on next week. So, but now we
yeah.
got to get into the league stuff, Ryan. The
We
important
got to
stuff,
look
the nitty
ahead to
gritty.
now. We got to look into the nitty gritty, the 2023 year. Looking ahead now. It's all about looking ahead to the fantasy
Yep.
season that's just around the corner, and that means we got a Commissioner Yee's update.
Oh no, no.
Hear ye,
I'm,
hear ye, hear ye.
Hear ye, hear
come
ye!
on.
It's Commissioner Yee with the MLR Fantasy League update. This is gonna be a segment that is now returning now that the fantasy season is just around the corner, and to give all our league members the update of the latest ongoings with our league, whether it comes to
New year, same ye.
New Year, same me, of course. Always just getting better. Just got to improve that same ye. But yeah, gonna give an update to our league here. This is where we we provide you with all the updates that you need to know to stay on top of being successful in the Fantasy Ruckers League. This is also going to be the place where we're going to announce if we are able to expand this league, or expand, I should say, expand Fantasy MLR to more leagues, get more people involved, get more people playing Fantasy MLR. This is where it's going to be announced. It's also going to be announced on our social pages as well. So like I said at the top of the show, if you're not following us there yet, make sure you do at the Fantasy Ruckers. Will be announced in our Discord channels as well. So you will want to make sure that you are following along with that. And there is workings. We are currently working. I will say that too. I can't say too much, but we are working on something that is going to allow us, hopefully, to open it up to more people and hopefully make fantasy rugby a whole lot more user friendly for our current league members. So we are working towards something. Hopefully we can get that finalized. But I can't say too much about that yet. Can't spoil it. It's still in the works, and we got to make sure that it is tip top before we say anything more about that. But nonetheless, let's remind our listeners and our viewers about where we are here in our Fantasy Ruckers League. This is a league that has 8 members in it. Matt, you're obviously one of them. Vandy's obviously one of them. Everyone is returning outside of 2 members who we are shifting over to 2 new guys that we've mentioned throughout the show. Rugby Wrap Up will be joining the Fantasy MLR League. Like we mentioned, we had an interview with them in our last episode of 2022. If you missed that, go check that out. Zach Lanning and Matt McCarthy both hopping on the fantasy MLR bandwagon, and we'll be having a team moving forward. We'll see how successful they do. They've already started the trash talk on social media.
I
They're
mean,
already
come on,
coming in hot.
hold on. If we're gonna talk about trash talk, somebody's got to go to their Twitter and take a look at these guys. These guys complaining about the fact that they're not seeing their lineups out for their Super Brew Rugby, picks. Come on. The other league members, they
They
know
don't
this.
even
You don't
know.
know the
They don't
struggle
even
yet.
know
You
the
don't
struggle.
know the
Exactly.
struggle yet. You
Exactly.
don't know the struggle of showing up 5 minutes before a game and realizing that 3 of your 15 starters aren't even on there. So, you don't know the struggle yet. You'll find out. You'll find out. But yeah, let's move on,
Exactly.
Ryan. But
And then
you'll find out. Rugby Rap.
also joining, obviously, like we mentioned before, James Dealey of MLR Stats
Yeah.
also joining the league. So we're super excited to have, and I said this in a social post, super excited to have some of the biggest names in the MLR community joining our league, because I think not only is it going to kind of give the fantasy give the idea of fantasy MLR more exposure, but just get the opinions and thoughts and kind of how they approach fantasy MLR, for guys that have been obviously involved in the league for quite some time, to see how they kind of
And
approach this whole thing. It'll be interesting to see.
And hey, just quick thing, I said something about rugby wrap up. I'll say something wholesome about James Dealey. He posted a picture the other day on Twitter of him skating, and look, I'm welcoming you. You're from the UK. You got an accent, but you got skate on your feet. You got skates on your feet, so you're basically Canadian. You said you weren't that
There we
great.
go.
That's okay. You weren't that great at skating. You probably won't be that great at fantasy rugby. It is what it is.
Oh my gosh,
Take what you
you're
can
coming
get.
in hot with the trash talk too, eh?
Yeah, let's
You're
keep moving
coming.
on. Let's keep moving on, Kamish.
All right, let's keep moving on with these updates. All right, so the biggest thing here that I think our league is probably having questions about is, when is this draft going to take place? And obviously, if any of you are out there are commissioners of other fantasy sports leagues, this always tends to be the hardest thing to figure out.
Yep.
Getting 8 people all together with the busy lives that we live into one space to get this draft done. But I will say that the fantasy MLR draft for the Fantasy Ruckers League will be happening sometime in the week of February 6th. So sometime between the days of February 6th and February 12th, we are hoping to have the draft. We will reach out in our Discord community about those dates, in our league channel about what days actually work for our league members. But that's approaching. That's just that's less than a month away. Less than a
Less than
month.
a month.
So
It's the
you're
9th. That's the 6th. The 6th, and then 9. It's like that's less than a month.
Yeah, it's less than a month. So yeah, so make sure all of our league members are looking out for that. We're going to try to finalize all that stuff. Again, it's going to be just like we did last year. We're going to live stream the draft. We're going to have guys picking, and we'll announce those picks live as they come, and get all those rosters slated out. It's going to be a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun last year. It's going to be a whole lot of fun this year as well. It does take some time to get through it, but hey, that's fantasy, man. The drafting is one of the best parts about fantasy sports, and it's no different in fantasy MLR.
It is. And like we said earlier, this year we know who we're drafting. We know who we're supposed to be getting. And yeah, I'm just excited for it this year. I'm even more so than last year. Last year was our inaugural. This year's our second time going. I'm a seasoned vet essentially. But yeah, the fact that we know what players are, I'm hoping that by the time draft comes, all the rosters are released. The fact that we know that, it's just going to make this draft even more electric. Make the prep for the draft even more electric. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited. I know you are too, Ryan.
Yeah, so we'll definitely get that finalized, and obviously, if we can have that date closer to the start of the season, the first matchup being
Yep.
on February 17th, if we can have it, on the 12th, that Sunday, that just helps you guys out in terms of getting the most amount of information before the draft as you can. So yeah, we're really really looking forward to that. Stay tuned for more details about that coming on our social pages and on Discord. The last thing here that will wrap up this Commissioner Yee's league update, and also the show here, is just kind of, I guess it's been some time since we've actually had this league run going. So I just want to give a
Yeah.
refresher quickly to our league members and to maybe
And we
people
got
who are just
newbies.
tuning in. And we got newbies, and just for for viewers and listeners that may be just tuning in and learning about fantasy MLR. I know I've been getting a whole bunch of DMs about, oh man, there's this fantasy rugby league. Dang, like I want a spot in that. And I've told them, you'll be first to know when we do expand to more leagues. And in the meantime, you can tune in here and get some I guess, studies done, some homework done before you actually have to join a league and actually make your own picks and make your own lineup. So basically, the basic structure of this league, it's really similar to other fantasy sports leagues. You set a lineup. We have the positions there. We went with front row, second row, back row, a fly half, scrum half, a forward flex position, a center position, a back three, and a back flex. So those are the positions that you'll be slotting in. A total of 15 roster spots that includes 10 of those starting positions and 5 bench players. So that will be what everyone is looking to fill out when it comes draft time. And then it just, throughout the entire course of the week, it's same exact format as very similar to fantasy football. You have your waiver wire pickups throughout the week. You'll be putting down bids for those waiver pickups. You'll be setting your lineups, and then you'll stress just as much as you do on football Sundays here in MLR Saturdays, Sundays, Fridays, Thursdays, whenever they do happen. You'll be stressing the same amount of time when those matchups do come. I guess I'm not going to go in the nitty gritty because I think I'll make a post about it for our league members to kind of get really refamiliarized with all of that. But for you, Matt, for someone who does play a wide range of fantasy sports, including fantasy football and now obviously fantasy MLR, if you had to give any tip, I guess, for our league members or for people who are interested about fantasy MLR and have played fantasy sports in the past, in your experience, you say you're a seasoned vet now, through the course of your first season, what is really the big differences when it comes to fantasy MLR versus other fantasy sports? Outside, I would say
Yeah,
outside of the information. We know that the
yeah,
stats and all that is a little bit tricky, but with all that in mind.
yeah, sure. I mean, look, I'm about to eat my own words because I'm gonna start talking, and you're gonna think, well, this guy's a seasoned vet. Yeah, it is what it is. But I think the main thing with fantasy MLR is just with rugby, especially, it's just the unpredictability. There are, yes, those guys that are staples of starting lineups, but at the same time, you're gonna have guys that jump in that you didn't expect to fill in, or somebody who's now outside of the 23. Maybe they're taking a rest for the day and you didn't really know until the lineup was released. And now somebody who you thought was for sure start is maybe sitting on the bench for the day. Um, I think just that unpredictability is just something you got to be on top of, but it just adds to that excitement because it makes that waiver wire just electric. I mean, I remember, you know, game day pickups being done right before 5 minutes before kickoff, being, hey, I need to pick him up. I need a guy. I need a guy. I need a guy. And you're trying to make sure that you can get him. So, yeah, I mean, fantasy MLR, it's electric. It's unpredictable. I love it. You hate it, but you love it even more because you hate it. So
No, that
that's what it
that
is.
is a perfect way to put it. I think the word that came to mind for me is volatility. It's
Yeah.
very volatile. It's a very
Oh, yeah.
volatile fantasy sport. You talk about football, you kind of know the guys that are starting on a week in and week out basis.
Yeah.
Outside when it comes to injury, the only thing that really comes into play is injuries and suspensions, and you kind of know that well beforehand. But kind of how rugby operates and just traditionally how teams approach matches and things like that and give people rest, you're going to have different starters. You're
Mm.
going to have different guys that are highlighted in certain game plans, and you're going to have things of that nature. So yeah, to your point, just a whole lot of unpredictability, a whole lot of volatility, but
Yeah.
hey, it just
And
adds for a little bit more fun.
exactly. And I gotta say, the other thing is that there is literally nothing like this in the world. There is no fantasy MLR anywhere else outside of right here. So that alone, being part of something like that, just adds to the excitement. It makes the volatility, makes the unpredictability even more fun because you know that, hey, you can see the potential with every week that goes by because the excitement that you have going into every week, the unpredictability, the way that you have to adapt, you can just see it and it's awesome. I love it. And I'm coming back hungry. I'm going for that seventh place. We're gonna see it this year.
There we go. Yeah, and again, if you aren't in a league yet, or if you haven't Obviously, outside of the league members that we have, if you're still itching to be a part of Fantasy MLR, don't you worry. We're working hard to make that accessible to you, hopefully in the near future. So you'll want to follow along and you'll want to be a part of this journey of us trying to make it a reality, because those people that are supporting that and have reached out to me, they'll be first to know, and they'll get those spots in the leagues when we're able to do that. And we're hoping that everyone can join along and hop on this journey and get into a league at some point in the near future. So super exciting stuff, man. 2023, it's here, dude, and it's gonna be a fun season.
Here. And hey, we forgot to bring this up in the news and notes. I'm sorry, but I think this is the perfect way to close out the show. You finished up your Commissioner League updates. It's time to bring us back to close it out with something that I wish Vandy was here to hear. I wish Vandy was here to witness the greatness that's about to come out of my mouth. But 3 days ago, maybe the best start to 2023. His favorite player. I know that he loves this guy. The Holden Yogurt, the chops.
Oh my gosh, I knew you were going to say that.
Is back with the New England Free Jacks. And I just wanted to make sure that we get it in this show. Vandy, I know you're listening. Your boy's back. Don't worry. You can draft him first. I'll let you have him. I won't take him. Just wanted to put that out there.
And just
let's wrap this up, Brad.
Just for a little context for our listeners and viewers who maybe wasn't following along last season, Vandy, who is a new rugby fan, watched his first full rugby season last year, chose Holden Youngert as his 9. And I think he had him on his roster for, 9 weeks? And I think he may have scored him
just
maybe
because
like 1
he
or
had
2
chops.
points. Just because he had chops.
Just because he had chops. And I swear he was on the bench for 9 of those weeks. So,
yeah.
Hey,
So,
I love the dedication. And he's back for you, Vandy. He's back, man. Enjoy the ride. Let's ride.
There you go.
Free Jack country. Let's ride.
All right. Great way to finish off the show. Again, if you aren't already, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers. We're going to be keeping everyone up to date about this journey of making Fantasy MLR a reality. You'll also be first to know, like we've repeated throughout the show, if we are able to expand this to more people. That's where we'll make that announcement in the next coming weeks. Going to be super fun. We're going to be punching out a lot of content, a lot of prep content.
Did you say nuts coming week? Nuts coming
next coming week. There will be in the next coming weeks, there is going to be a whole bunch of content that we will be releasing out for everyone out there that is all fantasy rugby related. We're going to give you our kind of our top picks of at each position for what we think heading into the Fantasy MLR 2023 season. We're going to hopefully do predictions. I know Matt has been itching and asking people about who they think is going to win the MLR Shield. We'll be making those predictions too. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. 2023 year, new season, but it's the same old host, the same old show that we bring you every single week, and we're super excited that everyone's tagging along with us.
And hey, for you listeners, if you think I'm about to hold back anything, if you watch back, start from episode 1, I've been for the people. I'm going to continue to be for the people. And I'm going to give you everything that you need to know inside this brain. You're not going to want it, but I'm going to give it.
All right. Great way to finish it. For Matt, I'm Ryan, and Vandy will be back soon. We're excited to share another 2023 Fantasy MLR season with all you listeners and viewers. Again, we so much appreciate the support, and we hope to have another fun season ahead. We really cannot wait. We'll see you next week.
Miss you, Vandy.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.